On today's edition of the show, Matthew Tkachuk is a Hart candidate. The Florida Panthers return to practice, and we discuss the possible schedule for the Eastern Conference Final and the relation the Florida Panthers have to the Carolina Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Panthers, your daily podcast on the Florida Panthers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into this Tuesday, May 16th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. I'm Armando Velez, and you can follow me on Twitter at MondoMan12. Follow the show account on Twitter and Instagram at LO_FLA Panthers. And shout out to the everydayers out there who come back here and to get your daily Florida Panthers fix. So, Cats fans, I hope you guys had a heck of a weekend celebrating this win for the Florida Panthers over the Toronto Maple Leafs. And, of course, we spoke a little bit about our matchup with the Carolina Hurricanes with the former host of Locked On Panthers, Josh Lick, a little bit. But great weekend overall. Of course, as you guys noticed, there wasn't a Monday show. Of course, I went on a little vacation to recharge the batteries here right before digging in and getting ready for the Eastern Conference Final. But we do have a special guest here on the show today. And this is an edition of the show where we bring one of the people who are there on the daily covering the Florida Panthers. She is Erin Brown of the Hockey News. Erin, welcome back to Locked On Panthers.
Thanks for having me. And I thought the special guest was going to be Shadow.
Oh yeah, she jumped in and then she walked out. But I did leave the door open in case she wants to make another appearance later in the show. Of course, if you follow both Erin and I on Twitter, we're always posting pictures of our cats on that on that part of social media. But I want to give you the floor for a few minutes or however long you want, just about giving your opening statements of your thoughts of the Florida Panthers making it here, your expectations, and so on. I want to give you the floor on that front.
Wow. Yeah, I think that, wow. Yeah, this has just been like a really wild season. And especially in the past month or so, for those who don't follow me, I was actually up at the Women's World Championship in Canada. I think I got up there about the 6th, and there was a point where it was right around when the flood happened in Fort Lauderdale. I got stranded there an extra 4 days, and I was very briefly thinking, you know what, maybe I need to leave early because what happens if there is end of season availability? I really got to get home, and then the flood happens, and then they somehow get into the playoffs, and since then, it's just been a whirlwind. I'm just kind of floored because, and I should throw in the mix of that is, while I'm stranded in Canada, I'm also seeing the United States win gold. So it's really been kind of a surreal month. But it's funny because going into the playoffs, once they had made it, we knew that they were either going to face Carolina, New Jersey, or Boston. And depending on how the seeds kind of shifted out in the end. And there was that possibility, like we really weren't going to know until the very end, who was playing who. And if I had to do the order of that list, Boston was actually number 2. And my thinking behind that was they were just one of 2 teams to have gotten 2 wins against the Bruins all season. Ottawa was the other, but they needed a shootout to get the second one. Florida did it in regulation and overtime. And I thought, you know what, that's not something that should easily be dismissed. So, especially when other teams didn't have anything close to the same success. So that was something where when everyone was like, this is not happening. I don't think looking at that, it was like, what, they might match up here. Like they just may kind of rise to the occasion. I don't think I expected them coming back from 3-1. I think at that point it was like, okay, well, it is what it is. I think after game 6, I think that's where everything just kind of turned on its head. And once they had that, it was, I didn't think they were going to necessarily lose 7. I just, there was something about it. The other thing that stands out to me about this team as well, compared to past years, they've been really excellent and building this over multiple years, not just this year, but building the ability to come back. That was a problem for this team for a very, very long time. They didn't start doing it until Quenneville came in. So they had that on their side. And the other thing is that they, in the last couple of years, have been much, much better in overtime during the regular season. To me, that's a good sign, because if you go out there with like the intent to attack right away, go for the kill, you're building that into your game, and now it's just showing. So yeah, I think it's kind of surreal, because I have followed this team since day one, even before I started writing. And I remember the year they were at. That was an insane year. And this has something to it. I think last year, when they went on the 13-game win streak at the end of the season, it was kind of like there was this kind of unsure feeling, like, is this for real? Are they really a special team? Are they on that level, or what are we missing here? And we kind of quickly found out. But there's something a little bit different with this, where they're not playing the freewheeling style. Like, obviously we see they're playing Paul Maurice playoff style hockey. They're doing well with it. And it's almost like something just clicked. And whatever that final piece just mentally seems to be there. So still a long road. Like, it's hard to believe there's still, 2 rounds if you get through one more. But it's really just kind of surreal. I don't think in November, December, January, we were thinking this is where we would see this team. I just don't think it was there. I honestly expected them to lose out on the playoffs after about December, mainly because when they had that bug that went through the team, I was like, oh, you know what? They're so close, but this is something that can just set you back enough to where you'll miss out by like a game or two. Just, you see it over time, how those things unfold. So I really didn't expect it. And then, like I said, my world was just thrown into chaos, traveling and whatnot. And so, hey, like, enjoy the ride, because, how long has it been to get this ride here? So it's been interesting.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, the 6-1-1 finish for this team to get to their seed as the 8th seed in the Eastern Conference, and of course, upsetting the Boston Bruins. And you spoke about this team, how they performed in overtime, even during last year's regular season. But since the 2021 postseason, the Florida Panthers are 7-0 in overtime. Ryan Lomberg gets that game winner in Tampa. Carter Verhaeghe gets 2 last year against Washington. The Florida Panthers get 3 this year in overtime. Verhaeghe, Tkachuk, Reinhart, and then now Nick Cousins. So 7-0 in overtime in the postseason. Of course, how stressful overtime can be, and the Panthers have come in the clutch since that 2021 season. And the Florida Panthers, now they're in this position. They're facing off against the Carolina Hurricanes. We're recording this right before Game 7 of Seattle versus Dallas, and with a Dallas Stars win on Monday night, we could very well see a all Southern Conference final on both sides of the bracket. And there's been a lot of complaints online about traditionalists, and in my opinion, listening to it is gatekeeping mentality for a lot of hockey fans. And listen, we talk all about growing the game and all that stuff, but then when you see these 4 teams, assuming that Dallas makes it, then you see people say, oh, no, not like that. So it kind of like irks me, and everything I've seen online, especially with how the TNT crew and how a certain analyst has been right on the Leafs bandwagon. I cannot wait if the Florida Panthers do end up being on the TNT side of things in the conference finals, which rumors say they're true. We'll talk more about that in segment number 3, about said studio analysts having to see the Florida Panthers there. So what are your thoughts on the possibility of all 4 teams being from the South in the NHL?
So it's funny. So one of the stories that I wrote this year for the Hockey News, if you pick up the, which issue was it? There's one right around All-Star time. So I think it was the Matty Beniers cover, the rookie issue. I did a whole story on just what's happening to the game in the state of Florida. And I just like pulled it up here. Anyone who's saying that, oh, this is going to be terrible, this is bad. No, actually, now I can't speak for Carolina, but if Dallas gets in, Dallas is one of the hottest markets for the growth of the youth game, or the amateur game even. The same with Nevada. Nevada is another state that has a huge metrics and growth as well. So, if you manage to get, and again, I never did any research on Carolina. It didn't cross my radar as I was number crunching here. But if you're saying these are bad markets to land in, probably the exact opposite, because the youth game is growing so much. There's a lot of interest in these markets. This is something that I think can propel any of these teams to that next level. So it's just short-sighted. I kind of laughed when I saw some of the tweets going around. I'm like, okay, well, people clearly didn't read the article I wrote, because it's again, 3 of those 4 teams actually, or those markets, make it into my story. So I don't know what to say. If you don't want to believe it, you don't want to believe it. It's not all TV revenue. If you think of how the youth game is supported by the NHL, like it's a big deal. Why? Because those are your future fans. Those are fans who are very committed to your team and to the hockey community. So, and they spend a lot of money. Anyone who's played ice hockey or just had to get like skates, equipment, like, it's not cheap, right? So what does that do? That brings in more sponsors, more companies that want their goods to be bought. So. And it's an area that's not been, I don't want to say maxed out, right? Like there are always going to be hockey fans in Canada and whatnot, but these are markets that maybe haven't been, totally untapped, or they're still untapped in some regard. So, there's growth there, and it is what it is. I mean,
And I can name another market that's not in the playoffs right now that has a lot of youth tournaments that go on in their city, and one of them is Nashville as well. That's one that consistently grows as well, and also from the AHL affiliates as well. Coachella Valley is new in the AHL this year, and they draw a lot in what they bring as far as Henderson for the Henderson Silver Knights as well. So that's a big draw on what they've done, and as far as what something that 32 Thoughts have spoken about as well, is that ever since Vegas has come around and now Seattle, those are those 2 are in the top 5 in revenue in creating in the National Hockey League. And maybe it might be expansion team energy in the last 4 or 5 years, but hey, it's still growing as far as this sport is as well. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing for this game, and it's definitely, we are definitely enjoying this as people who are living in Florida. But we're going to transition to segment number 2, where we're going to discuss more about the Hart candidates, and we're going to discuss where we think, or at least where I think, that Matthew Tkachuk is going to finish in the Hart ballot. But we are going to discuss this next here on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Game Time. And buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easiest way to buy tickets to all sports, music, comedy, theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and get hyped for all the fun you'll have. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets, football, basketball, baseball, hockey, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Game Time guarantees that you'll always get the best price. Find tickets in the same section row for less, and Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use Locked On NHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On NHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Segment number 2 here on this Tuesday, May 16th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It's a State of the Cats edition of the show. Erin Brown from the Hockey News is here, and it's crazy. The Hart finalists were announced prior to Game 5 between the Florida Panthers and the Toronto Maple Leafs. But honestly, with the Florida Panthers clinching their spot in the Eastern Conference Final, my focus was solely on recapping the game and everything that happened, and of course the journey that the Panthers had getting to this point. But the Hart candidates were released on Friday. Connor McDavid, who had 153 points, won the Art Ross and the Rocket Richard. Matthew Tkachuk with 109 points, 40 goals, and 69 assists, and then David Pastrnak of the Boston Bruins with 61 goals and 52 assists on the night on the season. Excuse me. And the third Florida Panther to be a Hart finalist, one of them was John Van Beesbrook in 1994, who finished third behind Sergei Fedorov and Dominik Hasek, and Pavel Bure, who was on the ballot in 2000, where he finished third behind Chris Pronger and Jaromir Jagr. I know you're part of the PHWA, and you get a vote here on the Hart. But of course, it's not released yet, and of course, through etiquette, you're not allowed to reveal who you voted for in which order. But the word around the street is that McDavid may be unanimous this year. But the real race, as far as the Hart, the conversation seems to be who's going to finish second, because most people know who's going to finish first.
Yeah, I think I can say as much as all three of those people were, yes, on my ballot. Where they were, I'm not about to say. But I think there are like 180 something votes. Obviously, they're all finalists. So yeah, those were guys who definitely stood out to me. I think that if you're going to make a case for Tkachuk, we'll forget the other guys, right? Like, yes. Who cares? This is
a Panthers podcast. So
it's Panthers podcast. Like, yeah, we don't necessarily care about the other guys. I think the argument you make is one, his output, but then you kind of have to start looking at the end of that season. And sometimes when you're voting on these things, it's not just a simple numbers kind of like, well, who scored more than someone else, because it doesn't always show sometimes. And sometimes you have situations where, a player is so good, but if you remove them from the team, you might not feel it. So like, yes, I'm sure the Edmonton Oilers would feel the loss of a Connor McDavid, but maybe not to the degree we would think so, because Draisaitl is still there, right?
Correct.
So same with like Pasta. You could also make the case for Ullmark, because Ullmark had an insane year as well. So if you pull one of those out, are they still going to have the season? Maybe they're not breaking records, but they're certainly going to make the playoffs and do well. So I think in a case like Tkachuk, like if you're going to make an argument for him, even I would say is like, if you were going to vote for him as a number one, is what he did down the stretch. Those last, I believe it was last like 8 games, he scored, or he got points in 7 to 8 games. He had 3 multi-point games, and that performance really helped propel his team into the playoffs. So, sometimes you do have to like dig down deep, and when you have guys scoring 150 points a season or over 100 points, it's clearly they are the elite upper echelon of the league. There's no question that that's who your Hart votes are going to go for. But then you kind of look at it too, and you say, well, is there a game where, I don't know, McDavid goes off and has 5 goals against, the worst team in the league? Does that really, make a difference? Does that make a difference in the long run? Maybe, maybe not. Like, so I think that's one thing that, if Matthew Tkachuk were trying to campaign for himself to have gotten those votes, that's, I think his performance in those last 8 games really are going to have an impact Because like we said earlier, Florida maybe shouldn't have been here. When you're the 17th team, maybe you shouldn't be there. But here's a guy who just, right around that time is kind of when Maurice flipped, when Tkachuk's dad comes out and says, they're playing soft, and he lights on fire, and here we are, 2 weeks into May. So still talking Panthers hockey. So I think that's a really good case. The concern I think that anyone should have with Florida players is, here's the reality. The Panthers do not get the coverage that you would see in Toronto or Boston or even, Edmonton in Canada. That's just the reality. Right. So it's something where even the people who are covering, like, a lot of the stuff's behind a paywall. So if you are a voter somewhere else in the country and you're not maybe subscribing to the Miami Herald, or you're not subscribing to Florida Hockey Now, I'd say The Athletic, but so if you're not like subscribing to those, you might not be getting the full story of what is going on in this market. And I think we kind of saw that last year with Jonathan Huberdeau. He had a fantastic season. He had a great all-around game. Yes, he was number one on my ballot last year, because one thing that stood out about him compared to the other guys I voted for is that he did a lot of penalty killing minutes, and he was still getting 115 something points. So, it's like, wow, you take him out of the mix. I don't think Florida's as good as they were last year, because he also kind of lit a lot of guys around him on fire. So I think that was overlooked. And I think in large part it was because, no one's looking past Tampa Bay to South Florida last year. It is what it is. That's just how it is, I think, in the hockey world. So one thing that I think helps Tkachuk too is that he's a personality. I think his All-Star game, was his party to say, hey, this is where I'm going to be the next 8 years, and I want to put on a good show for you all, and I'm going to go out there and skate and win MVP. Like, I think from his second shift, I was like, he's out for winning MVP. I'm pretty sure of this, but that's a great thing for the Panthers. It's going to make them really marketable in this area. And then I think that's going to spread to the rest of the country. Again, if you go read, there's a story I did on Tkachuk, and one of the things I pointed out is the top American players last season, not 22-23, I'm talking about 21-22, they were all in Canada. So yeah, they weren't getting on ESPN. They weren't being seen as much in the American market, because those Canadian markets don't really excite people. So now you've got one of the best American players in an American market. You've got the hype of Miami. Who doesn't love, the visuals that South Florida can provide? And you've got this, this brash, confident guy who is supremely talented. Like, it's going to be awesome to see how he emerges on this next stage. So it's a good thing for the Panthers, good thing for Tkachuk. I know the votes are in already, so if he does have some crazy coming out party, even now on the national stage, it'll be lost. But I think he's gonna justifiably earn some attention for himself and the team.
Yeah, and you mentioned it about the South Florida vibe with Miami. It kind of reminds me of Mitch Marner, what he did for the All-Star break and in the skills competition as well. Just enjoying the vibe of what it is in South Florida, and then comparing Pasternak, if you were to take him out. Of course, Linus Ullmark had a great year, which he's the Vezina Trophy winner more than likely, even though the GMs are the one who votes for the Vezina Trophy. And you think about what a guy does more with less as well, based on, and Tkachuk definitely fits that definition of someone who most valuable, not necessarily best player, most valuable. So it just depends on how you see value when it comes to putting a vote out there. And hey, who knows? We might see it not be unanimous towards Connor McDavid. Maybe we won't, but we won't find that out until late June, that's for sure. But we're going to transition over to segment number 3, where we're going to discuss more of what has gone on in Panthers practice, a little look at possibilities of the schedule for the Eastern Conference Final, and a player who has made his return to Panthers practice. We're going to discuss that next year on the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. But first, we're going to tell you all about Athletic Greens. And our next partner is literally a product that I use every day. And I started taking AG1 because I needed a little break from the caffeine. And so what is this stuff? With one delicious scoop of AG1, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients support your gut health, immune system, nervous system, energy, focus, and recovery. All the things. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition with just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Segment number 3 here on this Tuesday, May 16th edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It's another edition of State of the Cats. So we have Erin Brown of the Hockey News here to discuss the Panthers and the rumors and possibilities of when the games could be played. Like, once again, for the listeners, we're recording this right before Game 7 of Dallas-Seattle is played. So nothing is official yet. By the time this drops, we might know the official word on the schedule. But there's multiple reporters, one of them being Barry Jackson of the Miami Herald, saying that TNT is going to take the Eastern Conference Final, and then word on the street from George Richards of Florida Hockey Now as well that Game 1 is likely to start on Thursday and Game 2 being on Saturday in Raleigh, North Carolina. Also, there was one player who did return to practice today in a no non-contact jersey. Is Ryan Lomberg. Missed the entirety of the Leaf series and the latter part of the Boston series as well. And how much of a boost is this for the possibility of the Lamborghini being back in the lineup?
I think right now, I think the Panthers just have to figure out what is going to be the tone of this series. I don't know that you want to go in with like the aggressive style that they had to play against Boston, especially the last two or the last couple games against the Leafs. Paul Maurice kind of talked about that. Like they got away from that the physical style of play. It was very, very different compared to those early round games. So I think it's a good depth piece right now. I think things are working. Do not change what is what is the saying? Don't
if it ain't broken, don't fix it.
If it ain't broken, don't fix it. Yes, thank you. I could not get that out. Yes, I think that's just where they need to be at this point. And just feel it out. If it's a series that's going to get more aggressive, then yes, you absolutely need to put him in there. Get some chirping going, some physical play, get people off their edge. But I don't think that they can even kind of make that determination, because now you're going to have a situation where both teams are going to be pretty well rested. So, see where that takes you. Carolina's got skill on their side as well. I know they're missing some key pieces. All the same, I think it's, don't change it, figure out what's there. If you go in and, you split the series, maybe that's when you kind of think, okay, or if you go down a game in the series, I should say that if you go down a game in the series, then maybe think of changing it up. But right now I think it's too early to kind of really see what that tone is. So, like you said, we don't even have a schedule yet.
Yeah.
So it's hard to even figure out, well, okay, how much rest are guys going to have, who could be coming back. So I think it's good depth piece. It's nice, a nice problem to have, that if you do need to make a change for whatever reason, he's there. But right now it don't think you mess with things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you do, you would probably, at least this is just my opinion. If you were to at least put him in, you would probably put him back on the fourth line, because you definitely don't want to mess with that top nine. That's for sure. And the fact that he's back in a regular practice jersey 3 days, at least if the rumor is true that game 1 is on Thursday, 3 days before the conference final starts, that's a really, really good sign for the Florida Panthers, and good chance that he will definitely be back, as Paul Maurice said that he will be an option for the conference final. But I do want to talk about this really funny multiple correlations that we see between the Florida Panthers and the Carolina Hurricanes going into this series. So there was a tweet put out the other day on all the former Hurricanes who are currently with the Florida Panthers. Of course, Coach Paul Maurice, who is the last coach of the Hartford Whalers, moved with the team to Carolina, the first coach of the Carolina Hurricanes. They're from 96 to 04 and then 09 to 02. Coached Rod Brind'amour, by the way. The second one is Paul Krapelka, assistant GM for the Panthers, was the VP of hockey ops with the Carolina Hurricanes in 2019 and 2020. Same thing with Rick Dudley, except he was senior VP of hockey operations, but he's the senior advisor for the Florida Panthers. Jared Stahl, an assistant coach for the Charlotte Checkers, played with the Carolina Hurricanes in 2013, only 2 games. Bobby Seganini, hope I pronounced that right, assistant coach for the Charlotte Checkers and played 40 games for the Carolina Hurricanes. Assistant coach Tumarutu for the Panthers was with the Carolina Hurricanes 2008 to 2014. Of course, we know Eric Stahl, former captain of the Carolina Hurricanes for 7 seasons, but he was with the team from 2004 to 2006. Of course, won a Stanley Cup with them. Etulis Turainen, who was part of the Vincent Trocheck trade, who was the only Panther to be not on the ice for a 5-on-5 goal. He was the only player to have 0 as that number. Zach Dalpe, 2011 to 2014, of course, Checkers captain as well. Gus Forsling, who the Panthers picked up on waivers, and this is the funniest one of them all that I saw. Scott Darling's cap hit, which is the last year on the books. Of course, that was part of the James Reimer trade that sent him to Carolina on July 1 of 2019, and when the Florida Panthers did sign Sergei Bobrovsky in free agency. But this is the last year of the Florida Panthers having that cap hit on their books. So pretty crazy how the relations between these two former Southeast Division rivals.
Yeah, I guess it's what can we say? Hockey is thriving in this area, right? Like, come full circle. Just if you have people who are still wanting to, be down this way with these teams, they got to be doing something right. So, yeah, I think out of that entire list, though, to be honest, the one that stands out, obviously, Eric Stahl. I'm sure Panthers fans would love to see him kind of make up for for some diving in some past seasons. That would be would be well timed in a playoff series against the Hurricanes, right? That was such a crazy piece of lore. I wonder if that's ever gonna get dredged up, just because it was such a heated issue back in like the late 2000s, where it seemed like the Panthers would always have tons of penalties against the Hurricanes. They'd always accuse them of diving, and now you've got these two teams facing off in the Eastern Conference Final. So, and I think Stahl was accused of that a couple times, the whole diving thing. So it would be very interesting to see how this plays out, if there will be any sort of like full circle moment during this series.
Yeah, I think so much time has passed between. I mean, we're talking 13 plus years when you're talking about that, but also.
But I mean, like, it's 13 years, but like, you've also got the player that, the Panthers are the player that was kind of causing them fits in the past, right?
Correct.
It's just kind of funny, like that. It's like I said, it's just kind of full circle sort of moment.
Question: How much of a coaching advantage do you think Paul Maurice has over Rod Brind'amour, knowing that he coached him, but also Rod Brind'amour has brought this Carolina Hurricanes team to the postseason the last 4 seasons, even had a conference final back in 2019?
I don't know that there's I don't think like Paul Maurice is some like Obi-Wan figure who can read his former players' minds or something.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think one thing to Maurice's advantage, and that stood out to me, I think, as this playoff has gone on, he just seems more and more relaxed as this goes on. And he has coached for 25 years. There's a lot of detail that he's picked up, which I would think is to his advantage. Maybe in the past he just, he had ideas that could get teams far. Like he has been to a final, he just hasn't won a cup. So I think there's a lot that he probably has just from that long-term experience. Not to say Brind'amour doesn't have that, because Brind'amour has won a cup, but he's won a cup from the player's perspective. And, I think we do see a lot of times where players don't always make the best coaches. A lot of them do make great coaches, but not all of them. So, there might be something where Brind'amour approaches it from a player's perspective, but maybe that's not the right time and place. Whereas Maurice has done it from the coaching perspective. He knows what's worked. He knows what doesn't work. He has, I would hope, a really good feel of this locker room right now, when he needs to step in, when he doesn't need to step in, how he needs to step in. I certainly don't think he's trying to compete with Brind'amour. It's just, at the end of the day, like, they can make decisions, but the guys have to go out there and make the plays. The bounces have to happen in their favor sometimes too. So yeah, I don't know that he has any sort of like huge advantage. I would just say his, years of experience, I think, are not to be ignored.
Yeah, and Rod Brind'amour now being part of, I saw a stat, 97% of the Carolina Hurricanes playoff games / appearances, coach and player combined. And great, what a stat when I first heard that for Rod Brind'amour as well. And of course, Paul Maurice, you spoke about what to touch and what not to, and that goes to goalies. He emphasized again about not touching goalies, and that's Robbie Tallis's job as well. So knowing when to step in, knowing when to address the team, when to know not to say something prior to the game. He said, even last week, he was saying the players can pump themselves up themselves. I don't have to do it. Paraphrasing here, but also just the experience factor that comes with Paul Maurice and doing so, and knowing the tendencies of his team and having a grip of the locker room, that's for sure. But Erin, I want to thank you so much for joining me on this edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. Thank you for coming on this State of the Cats edition of the show. Tell everybody where they can follow not only you, but your work online.
Sure. So on Twitter, it's at Rinkside. Don't know how much longer I'm going to be on that, but yeah, at Rinkside. And then I do some writing for the Hockey News, the website, and the magazine. I don't think there's anything coming out anytime soon. There might be some women's hockey stuff. We'll have to pick another day to just talk about women's hockey, because if you have not gotten into that yet, you are missing out.
So yeah, so we'll definitely need to schedule a day in the future. That's for sure. But Erin, thank you so much for coming on to the show, and I will see you next time.
Thanks.
And if you like what you're hearing, please subscribe to the podcast to be notified every single time the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast jumps into your podcast feed. Don't forget to also subscribe to the other shows on the Locked On AHL network, including Locked On NHL, Locked On Fantasy Hockey with Flip Livingstone and Steele Roden, and Locked On NHL Prospects. Thank you for making the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast your first listen of the day. And for the everydayers, make sure you come back for tomorrow's edition of the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast. It is a Winans Wednesday edition of the shows. As Jacob Winans will be back to discuss his feelings all about the Panthers making it this far. And of course, as more news comes out on the schedule and player availabilities, we'll be discussing that on Wednesday's edition of the show. So I'm Armando Velez with Erin Brown, and you've been listening to the Locked On Florida Panthers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day.